thank you, Sally. You know, it's astounding when we do have people come and visit here. They're just amazed at the music program that we have. I mean, I for one do not take you for granted. Our Spirit of Praise theme is par excellence. I want to start out by thanking the two people who filled in for me over the last 2 weeks, musician Jennifer Farron and, of course, our own Laurie Masson, who spoke last Sunday. I appreciate that. You freed us up. I know, obviously, took 2 weeks off. The first week I went out to California. My parents live out there. They're both in their 80s and pretty frail. I've got a sister who lives with them full-time as a full-time caretaker, and she needs a respite occasionally. So I went out there and spent a week taking care of my parents, and God bless all caregivers. I mean, wow. So yeah, my brother and I kind of alternate now. He's got the 3 college-age kids who are doing that too, so that George and I don't have to get out there quite as often. And then last week, as many of you know, Reverend Carla's hearing, has been deteriorating. She was prescribed some neomycin eardrops back in 2005 before they really realized that neomycin can actually damage your hearing. And so we went over to Cincinnati. There's a specialist over there, one of the best in the country at restoring hearing through cochlear implants, in which they actually put like an electronic device in the inner ear to restore the hearing of someone who's lost their hearing. And it looks like Carla's a good candidate for that. So we spent a couple of days over there for that. We've got to go over to Cincinnati again this week for one more set of tests, and then we can probably schedule a surgery, and it'll be a process. I guess once they do activate the electronic device in there, you have to kind of relearn what these electronic signals in your ear are. So it's kind of like someone relearning the English language with her right ear. She'll still have her left ear, which so I think they think that'll be pretty helpful in helping Carla once again as her hearing is restored, being able to understand the electronic signals. So that's what we've been up to. So what have you been up to? Well, good morning. There was a couple that were married for 60 years. And the wife was on her deathbed, and the husband was, just at her side doing whatever he could to help her. And the wife realized it was getting close to her time to pass on, so she told her husband, go to the spare bedroom, and on the floor of the closet off to the right, you'll find a blue sewing basket. And so he went and got the sewing basket, and it was one with a cover. It actually had a combination lock on it. So he brought it into the bedroom, and she gave him the combination, and he opens up the sewing basket, and he sees 2 beautiful crocheted dolls and stacks of money. And he's just astounded, and he looks at her and says, my God, how much money is in here? She says, oh, about $95,000. He says, the 2 dolls. He says, yes, my grandmother gave me some advice as I was about to marry you. She said, whenever you get angry at your husband, a good way to release your anger is to sew a crocheted doll. And the husband began to just well up and say, wow, you mean in all of our 60 years together, you only got angry at me 2 times? And she said, no, the $95,000 I got from selling off all of the crochet dolls. Years ago at the University of Michigan, they did a study on people's attitudes and beliefs. There were a whole list of questions, but 3 of the questions all had the same top answer. One question was, what do people worry about the most? The answer was money. What makes people the happiest? Money. What makes people the unhappiest? Money. I am aware that one of the big complaints against churches is people say, oh, they're only asking for money all of the time. So I'd rest assured I'm not going to ask for money, although I wouldn't mind if you gave more money. But I want to talk about our attitudes about money. I know in Unity, especially when Carl and I arrived here 4.5 years ago, we took the approach of, we wanted to embrace the spiritual principles of prosperity as a spiritual community. So we set the intention that we were going to build the kind of prosperity consciousness that allows Unity of Indianapolis to have all of the financial resources it needs, so that all of our bills are paid in full and our obligations fulfilled and our desires demonstrated. And then if we want to do a fundraiser for a special event or something like that, that's fine. A fundraiser should be a fun-draiser. Be able to have fun doing something rather than doing it out of worry or fear. So let's talk about money. Rarely does a day go by that you don't have an interaction that requires money or commerce. There will be an exchange there of some sort. We can't ride the bus without paying the fare. And of course, it is important for us as spiritual beings having a human experience to be able to have the financial supply, the cash flow, to pay all of our bills. Yet it's astounding how many people consider money unspiritual. Many of on the long arc of or spectrum of Christian theology, at the very far conservative right, you got the fundamentalists who will tell you, they'll tell you that money is the root of all evil. However, these churches have bills to pay, just like we do. We've set an intention. We'd like to, for this calendar year, revenues of $240,000. We've definitely got $225,000 of expenses charted out. So here are churches that are saying money is the root of all evil, but they need to pay the bills, and they ask people for money, and they'll hold fundraisers. And then, of course, they'll pray for more affluent people to be a part of their congregation. And we'll turn to those affluent people and ask, would you be willing to give? And would you be willing to tithe? Give 10% of your gross. So a lot of that attitude can be unhealthy, especially if the affluent people are getting special treatment, or the reverse, say the affluent people are trying to exert manipulation over the congregation and what the congregation's vision and mission are. So how can money be such an important aspect of our daily life and yet have a lot of people call it a handicap to our spiritual growth? Well, let's go to that money is the root of all evil thing. In the first letter to Timothy in the New Testament, the 6th chapter, there is this verse, the 10th verse. For it is the worship of money that is the root of all evils. The worship of money. In other words, that's your number one goal, is money. You worship it. You put it before God. How do you think about it? That's the important thing. What's your attitude about the money? Is it an obsession that you have to get more money? It's up to us as to how we approach it, what we do with it. We can use money to make the world a better place, or we can go into the darker side of greed and corruption, graft, or all evils, as our writer of the first letter of Timothy says. So if we're willing to take a new spiritual attitude about money and recognize that money can be an expression of our creativity, then we can have a healthier relationship with money, which will draw enough money to each of us as individuals and to us as a spiritual community. So is it proper to pray for money? I remember hearing someone years ago saying, oh, no, you're not supposed to pray for money. That's the last thing you're supposed to pray for. But What would Jesus do? In all four of the Gospels, we have the story of him feeding 5,000 people. In the Gospel of Matthew, 17th chapter, 24th verse, the tax collectors are coming around and says, pay up the tax. And Jesus tells Peter to go cast a line in the sea, and he'll catch a fish that has a gold coin in its mouth. And they were able to pay the taxes. Wonderful symbolism there, of course, fish being an idea that brings the money to you to be able to fulfill all your needs. In the Gospel of Mark, 10th chapter, 17th verse, a rich young ruler comes up to Jesus and says, "What must I do to have eternal life?" And Jesus tells him to sell all of his things, give the money to the poor, and follow him. Again, very wonderful spiritual symbolism, because we're told that the young ruler balked at that. It says he had many possessions and he decided not to do it. Sometimes we're just a little too full of ourselves, and we're more attached to our materiality, attached to our things, rather than to our spiritual growth. And that's what that's all about. Are we willing to diminish our ego and be humble and recognize that the rich young ruler, by following Jesus, following the example, the works of Jesus, he would have had all of his riches returned to him, multiplied. And then, of course, in the Gospel of Luke, 8th chapter, 1st verse, there's the very direct question, well, how did Jesus pay for all of this stuff? How did he pay to be traveling around doing his thing? And we're told that many of the people who had been healed by him, people of means, footed the bill. And it specifically names several women of means who were footing the bill. So money is neither good nor bad. It can be God in expression, if you take that attitude towards it. In the Gospel of Matthew, 6th chapter, 24th verse, during the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells the people you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. In other words, if your focus is split, if you're focused just on the money rather than on God and spirituality. So those are the things that Jesus would do in regards to money. And in all civilized societies, there is this aspect of currency. You have to have something that people can exchange, because barter only works for people who have something that they can barter on a daily basis. So you need to have something that represents the energy that you're putting out. And that's one of the big challenges for a lot of people with money, is they tend to undersell what it is they do. If you're willing to put in 40 hours of work, you should be able to have the living wage that Theodore Roosevelt spoke of. Just having all of your needs met, your obligations fulfilled, and a little bit extra for your desires to be demonstrated. So there needs to be some sort of a means of exchange. I'm going to ask Jesse to put up a slide. Now, if we were to take out our money, we are told that this money is backed by the full faith and trust of the United States of America. But then, of course, we have these very interesting words that have been put on our currency since 1864, "In God we trust." On second thought, I think, now that's much better. We got to think prosperously. In God we trust. So, I think it's interesting that the decision was made after the Second World War to put it on coins. It actually didn't make it onto our bills until the 1950s. Because it reminds us that this money is a symbol. It's a signpost for something. It is a symbol of the spiritual substance of the universe. Now, earlier this year we did the book E Squared, and we talked about this energy field that underlies everything. It's invisible, but it underlies all molecules, and it is something that we can use our imagination to form into what it is that we desire. And when we get very clear on that thing, it's amazing how all of the resources of the universe come together to allow us to do what it is that our imagination sees so clearly in our mind's eye. Each of us has that spiritual substance available to us all the time. It is inexhaustible. So when the landlord does come to ask for the rent, We need to know and trust that the money will be there. It allows us to, of course, buy food, shelter, all of our basic needs of survival. But it's interesting because we don't eat money. We don't use money for shelter. It is a means of exchange. It's only valuable when it is circulated. You know, for example, I go to the grocery store, I give the grocer some money so that I can have some food. Now that grocer, of course, pays the employees, takes a portion for the grocer itself, pays the distributors, who pays the farmers, etc., etc., etc. This money circulates, and it's putting it out there, that energy. So it is important that we change our thoughts, our beliefs, and our attitudes about money. Someone might say, I need more money, and all outer appearances would confirm what that person is saying. They'll look at a balance sheet, or they'll look at the balance in their checking book, or the what's left in their wallet, and it doesn't seem to appear that there's going to be a way for a need to be met. But rather than say, I need more money, let me give you an affirmative prayer to use whenever you start thinking that you need more money. And that affirmation is, my money needs more of me. My money needs more of me. So what do I mean by my money needs more of me? I alluded to it just a few minutes ago. Our imagination allows us to form the spiritual substance of the universe. Each of us have been given God-given gifts, passions, and talents. Things that you do better than anyone else. Things that you have a passion for. Things that you love to do. That's why you're here to do it. Yet so many of us get talked out of doing that. So if you see that your money supply doesn't appear to be meeting your needs, are you willing to put forth something into this world to make this world a better place? And this is where people tend to sell themselves short. Like I said earlier, God bless all caregivers, you know, mothers, stay-at-home parents. Their work is just as valuable as the hedge fund manager who takes in $1 billion in fees in a given year. But we start to convince ourselves, or the doubts or the fears start to creep in, and we start thinking that we're not quite as valuable as a millionaire or a billionaire. And that's not true. You know, in a civilized society, anyone who's willing to put in 40 hours of work should have enough money to cover all it is that they need. Now, one gift that all of us have, because each of us have the 12 powers, and one of the 12 powers is the imagination. Imagination is a divine idea. And I've said many times, what do you need to know about divine ideas? You need to know that they exist and they're accessible to everyone's mind. Now, there are certain divine ideas that are right and perfect for you to express. And you need to do two things. One, believe that they exist, and be willing to express them when they come to your mind. You know through your intuition, yeah, this is it. This is the idea I've been looking for. And it's astounding, you know, the different ideas people come up with to make the world a better place. Consider a man standing by the river and watching the strong current and realizing, you know, if we were to build a dam here and put turbines in the dam, we could generate electricity. You know, 60 years ago, President Eisenhower was facing a real dilemma. After the Second World War and after the Korean War, our national public debt was the highest that it had ever been in relation to our gross domestic product. In fact, our national public debt was actually 127% of our gross domestic product. And right now we're, I think, between 95 and 97%. And a lot of people were saying, you know, oh, we just need to cut back. We can't spend any more money. And what did President Eisenhower do? He said, no, we need to prosper. And we will prosper by putting more money into circulation. So they continued to borrow money, and they built bridges, dams, roads, interstate highways. They supplied free college education to all veterans. They supplied money to encourage kids in grammar school who are good at science and math to get more specialized training so that they could become the engineers and the scientists of the 1960s and 70s. It put money into circulation, and as that money circulated, it accelerated our rate of growth. And that's true in our own personal lives too, if we're willing to put that energy out there. Just give our special touch to the world. We'll see more circulation. We'll step into the flow that is always there, provided we're willing to let go of our doubts and our fears. And it's astounding. We'll see it on an individual basis. You'll hear the story every couple of years of the person who's just living like a pauper, and after they die, they find tens of thousands of dollars stashed in every little cubby hole in the house. That person just didn't quite have the right attitude towards money, or because what they thought was the money was their security. Money is not your security. It is your faith in God, in this spiritual substance, that is your security. You have to have complete confidence that the spiritual substance will demonstrate in what we need. So instead of, I need more money, we affirm, my money needs more of me. Now last week, Carla and I, as I mentioned, were over in Cincinnati. And of course, when we were done, we wanted to come home. So we got on Interstate 74 and started to head west. Now there's a sign along the road that says Indianapolis, 91. Now what would have happened if Carla and I had pulled up to that sign, stopped on the shoulder, and sat there saying, oh, Indianapolis. Wouldn't it be nice to be in Indianapolis? Wouldn't it be nice to sleep in our own bed tonight? Ah, yes, Indianapolis, 91. What progress would we have made? We had to put our car in gear and drive down Interstate 74 and have that faith that in 91 miles we'd be in Indianapolis. Now, what would have happened if we started down the road and we started to have doubts and fears? I haven't seen a sign that says Indianapolis in some time. I think that they should put one every 10, no, instead of every 10 miles, why don't we put it every mile, that there's another sign of Indianapolis? Yet how many people treat their money like that? They look at their money and they, wouldn't it be nice to have more money? Or, gee, I need more money to be sitting in front of me so that I can feel secure that when my needs come up, they'll be fulfilled. So it's those doubts, those fears, that sense that money is the security that can really trip us up. So what are our resources? It's not things, it's not materiality. Like I said, with the rich young ruler, if he had sold everything, with the full trust that whatever you give away unconditionally and lovingly comes back to you multiplied, at least 100 times. So it's our mind, and our mind has ideas, and those ideas come into expression. That's what our best resources are. My money needs more of me. I know people had asked, why I was having us read the vision and mission statement every week at the beginning of the service, because those statements are an affirmative prayer. There are aspects of that vision and the mission that we had not yet accomplished. But by us saying that affirmative prayer at the beginning of each service as a community, we're building that prosperity consciousness that allowed that vision and mission to come into fruition. Ask yourself the following questions. Now, I'll have a copy of these questions. I'll have a handout out in the friendship room of the points I'm about to cover and our wrap-up of today's lesson. Ask yourself, what do you really love to do? What am I really passionate about? What would I do if I were guaranteed that I could not fail? What do I do better than anyone I know? These are the clues for what is yours to do. And like I said, it'll be different for each one of you. So if you hear someone else say, oh, this is what I'm going to do, you think, well, that's ridiculous, I wouldn't do that. Well, no, you wouldn't, because you have a different divine idea to express. So let's just take a moment now. Just close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath. And the first thing I want you to think about is a time in your life, it may even be today, where there was a lack of money in your life. And just notice how you feel about that lack. Notice the places in your body where you're feeling a constriction, where you're feeling a diminishment of energy. Okay, now let's cancel that energy. Just dissolve it and release it. And now, let's imagine that you have $100,000 sitting in front of you in your hands for your use. How do you feel now? Feel the difference. Feel how your heart just opens. Your heart is ready to pour forth love. $100,000 in your hands. I just want you to hover your hands over this money and just pour love into it. In spiritual circles, we say we bless the money. We can prefer prosperity on it. And we do that by just opening our heart and pouring love into it. And so every time money comes into our lives, or we have to spend money, releasing the money from our lives, we bless it, coming and going. Just putting more love, more energy into whatever money is coming through our lives. And let's have faith. And faith is just placing that belief that God will always provide. Have faith that today things start anew. Starting today, there will always be enough money in our individual lives and in our community life to meet all needs, fulfill all obligations, and demonstrate our desire. So just lock this feeling of prosperity into your senses. Just remember that feeling. And now open your eyes. This fall we're going to focus on prosperity once again. I know we did a prosperity focus back a couple of years ago. We're going to use one of Unity's favorite books, Prosperity's 10 Commandments. And we'll be starting that on September 20th. So we're about 6 weeks out. Now on September 20th, we're going to have Reverend Edwin Gaines here. Now if you haven't experienced Edwin, I really encourage you to do it. And I'd really encourage you to bring somebody who you'd like to see prosperity in your life. Bring them. Edwin has been a traveling minister teaching prosperity since 1976. And she was a mentor to both Carla and to me. And then we're going to kick off small group book discussions of Prosperity 10 Commandments for this fall, starting September 20th. And even if you don't join one of those book groups, I really encourage you to get the book and work your way through it. It's a wonderful book with good practical tools on how to build prosperity consciousness, of which I've just touched the surface of today. So here are the things I'm going to ask you to work on for this week. And I have Jesse put up a slide here, and like I said, I'll have this out in the friendship room if you want to take that home. But so we start out by, every time you handle money or think about money, immediately notice how you feel and what you're thinking. And be willing to release it and have that feeling again of the $100,000 in front of you. Release doubts and fears. Now, don't be an absolutist about this. Each of us has doubts and fears come into our life. But the key is, can you get to that tipping point of thinking positively, abundantly, 51% of the time? Because I know early in my life, when I started learning these, I recognized how, I had just been raised with a sense of lack. And so over time, like leavening the loaf, sure enough, that consciousness grew, and once I got to that tipping point, everything was just, from that point forward, I always had the confidence that it would come through, even if it was delayed. Number 3, the affirmation, my money needs more of me. In fact, let's say that together. My money needs more of me. So recognize your imagination is going to allow that money supply, the cash flow in your life to increase. Number 4, bless the money coming and going. Pour that love into it, pour that prosperity consciousness into it. Number 5, draw spiritual substance into the void. Just in your mind or in your intuition, just see that energy field that's underlying everything and see it just filling any void that you have so that it can come through any channel, probably one you didn't even expect. And what will happen, oh, is that a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. It's spiritual substance working through some individual hands here in the world to make your vision, your idea come true. Number 6, what do I love to do? Or ask yourself the list of questions. Just really look at what are your gifts, passions, and talents. And then number 7, follow through on the guidance that you get, the ideas that come, things that you should do and things you should not do. Sometimes you get the big stop signs. So, whoa! That may have seemed like a good idea earlier, folks, but this is not something you should be doing, at least not at this very moment. So those are our takeaways for this week. Our closing story is a 3-minute video of a woman who once was sitting around thinking, I need more money. And she asked the question, what do I do better than anyone else? She acted on the idea and has prosperity in her life.
In Minnesota, there's a firmly held belief that when God invented cholesterol, this is what he had in mind.
That might be true.
Martha Olson's cookies.
But we like this myth.
Yeah, I bet you do. The genesis of this belief stems back to 1979, when Martha and some partners opened the Sweet Martha's chocolate chip cookie booth at the Minnesota State Fair. They were hoping to make a little spending money.
Oh, absolutely.
How much money were you hoping to make? $1,000?
That would have been nice.
Could you have ever dreamed making $10,000?
No, absolutely not.
And how much do you make now?
It's sort of mushroomed, I guess.
To say the least. In fact, we could not find a state fair booth anywhere in America with revenues anywhere near what Martha brings in. Even though she only has one product, even though the fair runs just 12 days, this year Martha will gross well in excess of $2 million.
Really? Is it seriously over $2 million? No way. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm going to go back and check on the schedule.
Martha, who's a now retired elementary school teacher, hires 400 people for these 2 weeks. She's got 12 huge ovens that crank out 2,000 cookies a minute. And sometimes that's not fast enough to satisfy this ridiculously loyal following.
It is the best cookie I've ever had in my life.
I look forward to these all year. This is my favorite.
So what's her secret?
Where do you add the crack?
You mean the eggs?
No, the crack.
What's the crack?
I forgot I was in Minnesota.
Hopefully the viewers will get it.
I know. What am I missing?
Actually, her secret is to serve them hot and serve a lot. Step up to the counter and you better have either a major appetite or a minor in structural engineering.
Oh my goodness.
This Jenga-esque bucket, by far her most popular serving size, runs $15. Martha won't even guess how many calories are in here. But she insists it's a take-home pail, meant to be enjoyed for weeks.
But how am I gonna get this home?
You can't even get the lid on until you've eaten about 38 cookies. Don't even talk about take-home pail.
It says it on the menu.
Do you have like a cardiac surgery business on the side?
Obviously, Martha would rather not focus on calorie counts. And fortunately for her, for at least these 12 days, neither would her customers.
They are very addicting.
Steve Hartman,
Oh, the crack!
on the road
I should have known because everyone says that. Duh.
at the Minnesota State Fair.
From the Bible, the first letter to Timothy, 6th chapter, 9th verse. But those who only desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and hurtful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the worship of money is the root of all evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced their hearts. But as for you, in expression of God, shun all this. Aim at righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, and gentleness. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It is now time for tithes and offerings. This week someone was sharing with me, they've been coming now for a few years, that when they started coming, they grudgingly decided, because somebody had asked them to come to check us out. They were going through a depression, having all sorts of filth. This person was having physical ailments. They started to come on Sundays and just started to absorb the love, the energy, our teachings, our philosophy. And this person is now so much better. And they recognize how much unity is meant to them. And that we have been this lighthouse in central Indiana now for more than 100 years. That's what this is all about. This is what we support through our spiritual substance. So let's now exercise what we were just talking about. If you're going to give cash or check, just hold it in your hands. If you use the Donate tab on unityofindy.com and give electronically, just hold in mind what you're going to give there. And then open your heart and pour love into it. Confer prosperity upon it, to bless it. See it filled with the kind of loving energy that unity teaches, that Jesus taught. And then let's say the affirmation on the screen together. Divine love through me blesses and